And now for today's program. As a child, Rob Scheer was in foster care, but aged out when he turned 18, becoming homeless and carrying his belongings in a trash bag. He went on to serve in the military and had a successful career as a banker. When Rob and his husband Reese decided to adopt children from the foster care system, these children also arrived at their doorstep with all of their belongings in trash bags. Rob and his family knew it was time to change this practice, and the idea for their organization, Comfort Cases, was born in 2013, with the vision of assembling backpacks filled with comfort and personal care items. Comfort Cases has been featured on The Ellen Show, The Today Show, The View, and NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, just to name a few. In 2017, an Upworthy video featuring Comfort Cases received over 150 million views. And in 2018, Rob was named one of CNN's heroes. Rob and Reese are also featured in Bryce Dallas Howard's documentary film Dads on Apple TV+. Rob is the host of Fostering Change, a weekly audio and video podcast. In May 2022, Rob received an honorary doctorate degree from Lynn University. Rob's memoir, A Forever Family, Fostering Change, One Child at a Time, tells the inspiring story of his journey from foster care to foster parent and his drive to rebuild a broken system. Susan Silverman is a rabbi, writer, and activist based in Israel, where she is a co-founder of Miklat Israel, which enlisted 2,000 Israeli families in 90 locations nationwide to commit to harboring African asylum seekers who were threatened with imprisonment and deportation. She is also on the board of Women of the Wall. Susan is the founding director of Second Nurture, Every Child Deserves a Family and a Community, which partners with communities in Los Angeles County and Columbus, Ohio, to help prioritize fostering and adoption from foster care. While some people step forward and foster and/or adopt, many others support those families in a variety of meaningful ways, leading to more permanent, loving families for the kids who need them. Susan is the author of Casting Lots, Creating a Family in a Beautiful Broken World, a memoir that weaves the story of her family, formed through birth and adoption, with Jewish theology and ritual. Joining Rob and Susan today is Rita Soronen. For more than 30 years, Rita has worked on behalf of abused, neglected, and vulnerable children, providing leadership for local, state, and national efforts working to improve the juvenile justice and child welfare systems, while striving to assure safe and permanent homes for North America's children. Since 2001, Rita has led the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, a national nonprofit public charity, and since 2004, she has also led the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption Canada. Under her leadership, the foundation has significantly increased its grant making while developing strategic, evidence-based initiatives that act on the urgency of the issue. In 2021, the foundation dedicated more than $40 million to grants and award-winning programs, such as Wendy's Wonderful Kids, Adoption-Friendly Workplace, and the 100 Best Adoption-Friendly Workplace list, and National Adoption Day. Please welcome Rob Scheer, Susan Silverman, and Rita Soronen.
Suzanne, thank you. And I can't look, just listening to the description of the two of you, Rob and Susan, I realized how excited I am to be anytime with you, but particularly today to have both of you together in this conversation. I'm honored, I'm excited, and I can't wait to hear the conversation that happens. So maybe Rob, we'll start with you. We heard a little bit about your background, but could you dig in a little bit deeper and maybe talk about your personal story and how that led to the creation, again, of Comfort Cases and the need that's behind that? It's just so incredible. I will hand it over to you, Rob.
Well, Rita, thank you so much. I'm so lucky that I actually get to call both of you amazing humans, my friends. And, you have both inspired me all the time. But, these 5 amazing humans that you all see on my wall, they are the ones who truly inspire me every single day to push more and more for change within our foster care system. My story, as most people have read or you've seen videos, I grew up in the system. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. Most of my siblings, they were the statistics. They, teenage pregnancy, drug addiction, incarceration. And for me, I just wanted something different. I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to get an education, and I just wanted someone to love me. I really realized that, when my children arrived, it was that aha moment that, people say, oh my gosh, you saved these kids. No, 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 no. They saved me. I needed to be wanted, and my amazing kids have done that. But for me, I was all interested in business. I am a banker by trade, 28 years, and that's what I focused on, again, until my children arrived. And as I saw them carry trash bags, just like I had carried in the late 70s, I was just horrified that we had not seen any change after all of these years. And so 10 years ago, in October, my husband and I gathered some of our local politicians and, people from our church and my employees, and we started packing cases with brand new pajamas. And, we wanted every child to have an activity, to have their own toothbrush and toothpaste, lotion, shampoo, conditioner, bar soap. We wanted every child to have a book, because I truly do believe that if you educate a child's mind, you actually educate your future. And then we give everybody a stuffy and then a blanket. The blanket is so, I think about it all the time, especially how many we've given out. But it was my son Grayson, who was 5 years old, and he said, Daddy, we have to give everybody a blankie. And I said, why a blankie? I said, these kids aren't cold. And he said, I know, Daddy, but every time they wrap themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them. Rita, that's what each and every one of us want. We want to be loved. We want to know that we matter. We're not disposable like the garbage bags we see. And with that, we pack a comfort case and another and another. And in the last 10 years, my friends, we have delivered and packed, because of our community, mind you, we have delivered and packed over 185,000 cases to all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico, and have actually broadened our horizons to the UK now. It's a little bittersweet. It's kind of, I love the fact that our community is stepping up and they're donating, and they're helping, but it's also sad to know that we have to do this in the first place. So that's our story in a short period of time, Rita.
It's amazing. And I've only known both of you for a relatively short period of time. It's only been the past few years that I've gotten to know you, but I feel like you're both my incredibly best friends because of the passion that you share for this. And Susan, the same is for you. Look, you are internationally known in terms of your advocacy and your activism and the scholarly approach that you bring to so much, but with that sense of community. Talk a little bit about your experience, your personal passion for this notion of adoption and caring for children, and how it's led to both of you becoming an author, becoming a founder of an organization, and spreading that message in so many ways. And I'll hand it over to you, Susan, to share a little bit.
I will never remember to unmute. Thank you so much, Rita. And if it's okay, I would first just like to talk a little bit, just respond to Rob, because Rob and I co-hosted an event in LA recently, and I wanted to do a Comfort Cases event, and I met with him in DC, and I said, so what would it take to, for you to come to LA and do an event with us? And he goes, I'll just do it. I'll send you the stuff and I'll take care of it. I'll be there, like in a half a second. And that just like is Rob, and that is just so incredibly Rob. And Rob spoke at this event, and I'm telling you that, I'm in touch with a lot of people who had come to the event, and everybody says, Rob Scheer, his story is amazing. And it was just so impactful for so many people. So Rob, just telling your story alone, never mind the, thousands and thousands of lives that you've impacted. So I grew up in a loving and safe family. And my parents actually became foster parents. So I had foster siblings who came and went from my biological family. And it was very impactful for me. I was little. But I still remember my foster sisters. I had two foster sisters, each for a couple of years. And I remember the oldest one, when she turned 18, just like leaving and just becoming homeless. And my mom just begging her, to come back, begging her to, stay with us, and that she just couldn't kind of manage that. She was probably about 16 when she came to us. And then the younger one, Rose, was with us for a couple of years and then got, I don't know, I was little, I don't really know. And my mom says, like, to the end of her life, like, she didn't know what exactly had happened, but she was moved. And I will always remember standing in the garage, and I must have been 6 or 7. And I just remember standing there and seeing her in the back seat of the car. And my dad, I guess, was driving her to the social worker or something. And she was sitting there with all of these bags around her, suitcases that my parents had bought her, like very strange gift for like an 11-year-old, a set of suitcases, and bags from my dad had a clothing store. So bags from his clothing store, and her just sitting amidst those piles and looking ashamed and thinking, like, for a little kid to like be full of shame, and of course, as we know, for something completely beyond her control. So it was just very, very impactful for me. And I always knew growing up that I wanted to adopt. It was just sort of like part of my thinking, not knowing sort of the whole world and what it meant and what complications were, but and always imagined being a social worker. The story I don't need to go into, I became a rabbi, very sudden thing. I was raised completely secular, but it became very important to me, community. And so kind of like at one point I realized I needed to merge those two things, that the challenge of getting kids into families, actually one solution was going to be the power of communities and of families, households within those communities, and the kinds of support that they offer were going to like allow people to move forward and sort of do something that might have otherwise felt too risky, unknown, but we could, through community, make it known, through community, show the path to it, and through community have people around you who were, fellow travelers on this path.
Thank you. Thank you. You both speak to something that's so critical in this conversation. And for folks that aren't enmeshed in child welfare every day, I think sometimes we know from some research we just did that 51% of Americans believe that children are in foster care because they've done something wrong, right? They're juvenile delinquents. That's actually the phrase that they use. And so how do each of you in your work address, you talked about the shame that someone can feel, a child feels, of course. And Rob, the whole trash bag syndrome and that notion that these children are just disposable. Some of those messages and misperceptions still permeate outside of child welfare and sometimes inside child welfare. Talk about how each of you work within your organizations to begin to address both the need and the myths and misperceptions that just surround these children in such a way it becomes a barrier for them to move into homes. It becomes a barrier for people thinking about fostering or adopting. And I'll let whomever one of you wants to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, Susan, I'm going to jump in real quick because Rita, you hit the nail on the head, the myths that we hear about our children. And I just want our watchers and listeners to know that these kids don't belong to me. They don't belong to you. They belong to us. They came into the system because of a choice someone else made, okay? We have the opportunity to choose and help them choose a path. From our organization, we have started from the very beginning by the first thing that we realize that needs to happen within our communities, and that is to change our vocabulary. We must change our vocabulary. Children who are in foster care, okay? We need to remember what I just said, children. When you say the word children, your heart warms. When you say foster child, foster kid, that F word immediately makes us veer to that there's bad. By the way, there's no such thing as a bad kid. It's a kid that needs to be redirected, and for our organization, that's what we keep reminding people. We remind people every single day, change your vocabulary, okay? Start talking about, what we can do. And remember, I'm somebody who, my son's 21. He came home at 18. We decided to do an older adoption for our 5th child. And gosh, what a joy. What a joy. And by the way, he's a teenager at one time, just like all teenagers are. Like I said, I've never met a kid that I could wrap my arms around and love them, because they're children. What do you think, Susan?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes like it's with humor. So when I'm speaking and people will always ask the question, like, but isn't it really hard? Isn't it really challenging? Aren't the kids like really problematic? And I'll usually kind of give an outline of my experience with my older biological daughters and my sons who I've adopted. And let's compare who is more difficult, because you know what? It didn't pan out that the ones who were more difficult were the ones who were adopted. I think if anything, they had a leg up, and so just the reality, right? What was the reality? What were the challenges that I faced with my bio kids? What were the challenges I faced with my kids who were adopted? And I had challenges with all of them. I mean, believe me, all of them, but, they were pretty comparable, if not quite outweighed by our biological daughters. So, it's not like nobody is predetermined, and none of us believe that people are predetermined, but then we will sort of apply that to this sort of, this demographic of children. And the other piece is that that knowledge, that not just knowledge, but connection is what really matters. So, people sharing their stories, like Rob, and you share your story, or in our communities, it's really important to us that the people who are fostering have an opportunity during times that the whole community is gathering to speak about their experience fostering, because demystifying is everything. As I say to my kids, like, the opposite of anxiety isn't calm. The opposite of anxiety is engagement. Right. And so if we can help people to engage, that helps to alleviate the anxiety about this kind of thing. And I would say the third thing is that if we all believe that every child deserves a family, then someone has to be those families. It can't be in theory. We can't theoretically believe that, and then kind of stop it there. Right. We have to somehow be part of the solution, whether we're fostering or helping other people to do so.
So important. Thank you both for that. And Susan, that leads to a little bit, can you do a little bit of a deeper dive into Second Nurture and how you came about thinking about the importance of an organization like Second Nurture and the goals for where it's going, how it's grown and where it's going?
Sure. So, well, I first want to say, Rita, as you've heard a million times from me, it wouldn't exist without you. And just for people to know that that somebody brought me into Columbus, Ohio to speak about this idea. And Rita was there, it was at the Columbus Foundation, and she came up and introduced herself and she said, might you have time in your schedule to meet with me? And I was like, how's now? So she said, sure. So I followed her back to the Dave Thomas Foundation. And from the very beginning, she funded us, she made this possible. And so Rita, number one, it's because of you and just this faith in this vision, this, kind of idea. And so, that I'm eternally grateful to you. And so the idea came about because the question really is, right, that we're all grappling with is, how do we move people forward from thinking about fostering to fostering? And as the Dave Thomas Foundation and their incredible research has shown that probably what was about a third of adults in the US have considered fostering, but a teeny tiny percentage of people actually do it. So reading these kinds of reports, I thought, like, how do we move people forward? What do we do? And that's where, this idea of community came in. And I thought, well, when people foster or adopt, and, I know from having adopted as well, like, there are all these groups that you can then join, because having people around you who are in, some sort of similar path is really helpful. But you don't get there until you're already in the world, right? Or you're already fostering or adopting. So I thought, well, what if we switch that paradigm? What if we start with community and start with the place where people feel supported, and from there try to move a percentage of those people forward to foster and other people within the community to support them. So I just kind of like went around when I was on my book tour. I was in lots and lots of cities, and everywhere I went, I planted this idea. And a rabbi named Susan Goldberg in LA we met and she said, like 3 people from my community this week came up to me and said, we have to do something about foster care. I'm in. And so like Rita, she sort of jumped in. It was Wilshire Boulevard Temple in LA. And we just began, we just did it. And, you know, I feel like I'm interested in the theory and I'm interested in reading about it because it helps me to grow, but I'm just really interested in the work. So we just said, okay, let's tell people people need to foster and let's bring them together and let's have orientations and let's not like, you know, just kind of perseverate. Let's just see who will start and get going. And so that's how it happened, is that we just sort of said, who's interested, low bar, just have to show up, you know, one meeting, one orientation, cohort meeting. And from there, it just kind of, it was like contagious in a good way.
Thank you. And Rob too, you know, Comfort Cases, what a phenomenal organization responding to a very sad need in this country, that we still allow children to move from what, first of all, that we allow them to move from placement to placement to placement while they're in foster care, and that additional trauma that it creates for a child who's already been traumatized by whatever they've experienced in their household that caused the removal, the grief and loss that they're experiencing that may be that certainly is unresolved at that point of removal and may linger with them for life, probably does. And that we say, well, it's okay to put the few things that you have in a trash bag and take it. So, you know, so grateful for your personal commitment to that, your personal experience, and what has grown to be, again, a ridiculously large, nationally known, amazing organization, internationally known now. But what are your ultimate goals? Obviously, all of our goals are to put ourselves out of business, right? Somehow we figure out this puzzle that is families of that bring so much to children and lay it on their shoulders, whether it's substance abuse or domestic violence or physical harm. How do we fix that? Of course, but our goal is to get ourselves out of business so children don't linger in foster care. But until that day, Rob, what are your near and long-term goals for Comfort Cases?
Well, you know, first of all, you know, like Susan said, Rita, I am absolutely, every time I get to say your name, knowing that I get to call you my friend and not just Rita, who is the CEO of Dave Thomas Foundation, I pinch myself literally, because your Dave Thomas Foundation, first of all, happy 30th anniversary. I mean, 30 years doing, you know, the work that so many people have chosen not to do, that you all have just gone through it every day after day. But, you know, the Dave Thomas Foundation came into my life years ago when they sponsored Wednesday's Child in the DC market. And it really opened my eyes because, you know, I was tunnel vision. You know, yes, I had kids come in from the system, and yes, they carried a trash bag. And yes, I grew up in the foster care system and aged out and became homeless. But I was so tunnel vision about the system because I didn't want to recognize how much we have continued to fail these amazing humans who are all of our children. And, you know, for Comfort Cases, my dream, and I say this so many times, is to walk to every capital in every state, and to stand in front of our lawmakers and let them hear the story of child after child after child that we have continued to fail. You know, when you look at the fact of our statistics today of our children who are in the system, you know, we've got to have change. And I truly believe that change happens from the moment they walk into foster care. And that means the difference between handing them a trash bag and they feeling disposable and not wanted and not loved, then handing them a comfort case where they see, and I had this happen several years ago in the Midwest where a young boy got a case. I happened to be there. He started crying. I sat on the floor and I said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Mr. Rob," he said, "I've been in foster care for 3 years. I've been in 11 homes, 11. He said, "Every home I go to," he said, "you know, I've never had something like this." I said, "What's that?" He said, "All of this new stuff." He said, "Why would somebody do this?" And I remind him, Rita, as I remind people all the time, you do not have to know someone to love someone. You know, as Susan said, stepping the community up to understand that not each and every one of us can foster or adopt, but one thing we all can do, and that is build a foundation for our children, which are children in the system. So that's what I hope to see happen within comfort cases.
That's great. Thank you. And again, you both inspire me every day. So thank you for that. So you alluded to it a little bit, Rob, that the need in this country in particular, 400, as we're talking here today, more than 400,000 children are in some sort of substitute care, whether they're with extended family or a foster family that wasn't known to them, or some kind of group home or institutional care, whatever their circumstances are. More than 400,000 children right now are in one of those, not in their biological family home. Another 117,000 children, the abuse has risen to such a level. The case has wound its way through the court system, through the child welfare system, to a point that a judge has said and made a legal determination that this child can no longer be legally related to its family, his or her family of origin, because of the abuse, because the family just is no longer able to care for this child in a safe way. So 117,000 essentially legal orphans in this country. And the one number that drives the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption and its programs every day is, of those 117,000 year over year, 20,000 of those children who have been freed for adoption leave foster care without the family we promised them. The day a judge pounds that gavel on their desk and says, you know, you are now permanently terminated, and the phrase is terminated from parental, you know, their parental rights, terminated, such a strong word. But the day that the judge TPRs that child, our implicit promise to them is that we will find you a family, but we fail 20,000 children year over year over year over year. And we know what happens to those children, not because they're bad kids like you've talked about, Rob, not because they intend to do things in a way that raises people's eyebrows, but they're at a much elevated risk of homelessness, of being undereducated, being underemployed, of becoming early parents, of moving back into the systems, government systems, whether it's criminal justice or juvenile justice or other systems. So how do we begin to address this need? I think I want the wisdom from both of you. How do we address this need, this unseen population of children that are, again, at risk of being trafficked, at risk of so many negative consequences, simply because they don't have the safety net of family? They can't make a mistake in their young life. You know, they're however they intended to get to work, somehow they can't get there. They lose their job. They're on the street. They're homeless. They, you know, frequently are just living on a thread. How do we begin to move this country to understand who these children are, what they can do to help, and that 18 doesn't mean you're a thriving adult. 21 doesn't necessarily mean you're a thriving adult. No human should live without the security of community and family, however we define that family. Sorry, I'm rambling on, but I'd love your wisdom about how do we address that particular population of children?
You know, Rita, I will have to tell you, I think one of the biggest things that we fail with is that we fail doing what we're all three doing today, which is talking about it. Okay. So many people are like the ostrich with their head in the sand, and they don't want to talk about, you know, those 25,000 kids that were just like me. You know, I keep thinking the fact that I was one of those kids, aged out, became homeless, carried a trash bag, uneducated, don't even know the difference between there. And if I didn't have the grit, where would I be today? Probably where my brother is, which is serving life in prison. You know, not because he was a bad person. It's because you feel you're at a point where you have no other choice, You know, when your stomach is growling for food, when you have not been able to lay your head on a proper pillow, you know, life takes you over. And that's why, you know, I feel that first thing we have to do is we have to educate our community about kids that are in foster care. We have to start preparing them from the very beginning that they walk into the system. We must prepare them for aging out. And that means that we need to set them up for financial success. I'm not saying write an 18-year-old a check, because I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I know how they are with money. But what we need to do is make sure that they have a safety net. You know, it reminds me of the fact of my son, Alex, who, when he was 19, he had gone to visit his biological brother. And he called me about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he was like, Pops, he was like, I locked my keys in the car. And I was like, what? And he was like, I locked my keys in the car. So after being the dad that I am and saying, come on, what did I do? I called AAA. I got his keys. He got his keys. He came home. My son walked into the front door that night and he looked at me and he said, Pops, he said, if I was still in foster care, he said, one, I wouldn't have a car. Okay. Number two, I wouldn't have a Pops to call to help me and bail me out. And he said, and that is something we as a society must realize. Every child deserves a foundation. They deserve to be loved unconditionally. And at the same time, way beyond 21. Way beyond 21, because we all yearn, and I've yearned my whole life for a family. And it doesn't matter what age you are. Giving that family, anyone can do.
Susan, any thoughts on it? I know it's Rob is always a tough act to follow.
He's a very tough act to follow, but I'll forgive him. I would just, a couple things. One is that, I realized that the most successful second nurture would be to be multi-generational, and it'll be more impactful for kids a generation from now than the kids now. And that's a very hard thing to swallow, because I feel like, what's the point, if it's not going to have immediate impact on the kids who need us. But the truth is, it does have some, but ultimately, if we can create this as a cultural norm in communities, when it will really be impactful, should we get there, is after I'm not on this earth anymore, right? Like when it, for it to become a cultural norm. So one thing is to realize we can do what we can do, and we just keep going, because, there's a Jewish story about, this man is planting a tree, and someone comes and says, well, why are you planting this tree? You'll be dead. And he said, just as my ancestors planted for me. I'm sure every, community has a story like this. I'm planting for my children. And so I feel like part of what we're doing really is also planting for the children to come, and in the meantime, we want to have as much impact as we can, right? And so part of that, I think, is tapping into passions that might not be related to foster care in the minds of the people doing it, but that it is. So for example, we just made a new partnership with one of our communities in LA with something called Forever Friends. And Forever Friends is amazing. And they have group homes. And a lot of the kids in the group homes are on probation, or somehow, circling or in the juvenile justice system. Now, this community that we work with, they are very passionate about incarceration issues. And the piece of that they work on is people who had been sentenced to life as minors. And so since they already have a cohort and they're fostering, but they think of it as a separate thing, we came and said, hey, how about this partnership with Forever Friends? Because let's go upstream. Let's go to the kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system and try to get them into families so that they can avoid that. And that made them super excited, because they're already doing this, but this is bringing the two things together for them in a way that really mattered. And so I think, something that it seems like Columbus is really doing well is making sure that people are partnering and collaborating, and that there's not this siloed, point of view for different organizations, because it is so connected. And so the really urgent thing is being able to see that it is all interconnected. And I know that LA, there's just a recent report out that they're making a very big effort through public-private partnerships to work on this kind of more openness and this awareness, because often one organization doesn't know what the other one is doing, and it's either wasteful and overdone, or some things aren't getting met and we don't even know it. So I think and collaboration is wonderful, because it's so encouraging to be with other people who are doing this work.
It's It's brilliant. And I was actually thinking about that before you jumped in, the critical need for individual, organizational, community partnerships in this conversation, because this is about children and families. Children and families can only thrive in that original partnership, which is a family, and that extended partnership, which is community. And it makes me think, you know, from our inception at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, it was built on a partnership. It was built on this unique relationship between a corporation and a foundation based on its founder's personal passion for adoption, because our founder was adopted as well. One of those areas of partnership, and I know it's important to both of you, is that faith connection. Talk a little bit about the importance or what faith communities can do to jump into this issue and make a difference, whether it's driven by scripture or by personal passion to community. How does the faith community weave in and out of this?
And the rabbi, I'll start. Okay, so, well, there is really, I imagine, no faith community that says screw the orphan, right? I mean, it is something that everybody touts and everybody cares about. And so I want to be no nonsense about that, right? We can talk about it, you know, about how we care about this or that in sermons, but it does not matter unless something's happening. So tapping into kind of the values that matter to the community. And one thing that, you know, we started with synagogues, and since I'm a rabbi, this is the world that I know, and this is why we started. We've expanded to churches, and we want to expand outward to other communities. I know that we have our eye on Stonewall Columbus to see if, you know, what we can do with them there. But starting with the Jewish communities, I was able to work with partners, much of which Dave Thomas Foundation funded, to create Jewish materials. So we have materials for almost every single holiday. We have programs that are kind of holiday based, but are about working with a partner called KidSave, where they bring adolescents and teens, and people come and meet, and they kind of have social time together and then try to evolve that forward. And so we have a Jewish program for the whole year for KidSave events. Now, we're not, of course, like trying to get the kids to know about Judaism or to be in it, but what it does is we kind of take the underpinnings, the concepts, and build on those for the program. But for the people who are coming, they feel rooted in what matters to them, so that we're able to kind of, I hope, give people a grounding in their community as they're kind of branching out and trying to reach out to kids. So hopefully we're kind of, you know, meeting that practical need of just getting adults to meet kids, and also helping them to feel grounded, a little safer going forward. So I think, you know, our cultures are just very important in this. And so to that end, we have all this programming. We have, you know, seeds for sermons for every single rabbi. At one point, I met with someone from the Archdiocese in LA, and he said, "Can I have your materials?" I'm like, "Sure." I sent them. I said, "Make them Catholic, you know, like do what you need to do, because it doesn't matter. We just want people to feel rooted in their tradition, and enabling that to branch out to think about fostering."
Yeah, you know, Susan, I have to jump on that because we are not a religious-based organization. And one of the things we highly make sure happens is that the books that we put in our cases do not have any type of religious, and that's because I believe that every family who's fostering, you know, has the opportunity to talk about what their faith is. It just so happens in the Scheer home, we're Methodist, and, you know, we have a very deep faith. And, you know, I remind people all the time that, you know, Jesus was no different than Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. He loved his community. And I truly believe that if we can get in front of, you know, our synagogues, our mosques, our churches, and truly talk about why were you built? Why were you built? And really understand the fact that if we were to step up and do what we were supposed to do, and by the way, I've been going to the same church for 12 years since my kids and I and my husband moved into the town we live in. And I ask my minister quite often, you know, when have you ever had a social worker reach out and want to come and talk to our congregation about foster care? And she says that ever since I've been here, I've never had a phone call. and that's something that we must think about, because if it's happening in my small little town of Darnestown, Maryland, it's happening all over the country, that churches are not being brought into the forefront. And again, I'm not putting my religion down anybody's throat. I'm just telling you, whether it's a Unitarian church, whether it's, a Baptist church, a Methodist, Pentecostal, a mosque, a temple, we all must understand, why were they brought here? To take care of our children. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you both for that. I've got two questions left. I think one is fairly philosophical and the other is very specific. So we'll start with the philosophical first. Look, the past couple of years have been grueling globally and certainly in the United States. First with COVID, and then with that elevation of what has existed for so long, systemic racial injustice, and highlighting that in the child welfare system with an overrepresentation of children of color in the child welfare system. There's been the LGBTQ plus backlash in states to rising to the point of legislation really denying access, denying rights to how people identify themselves. The recent Supreme Court decision about Dobbs and abortion, and now the concern about what's going to happen with child welfare and infants. And again, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, these conflicts and these conversations and this unrest just engulfs us all. Certainly the indigenous child issues and native issues, again, all of this is coming to, it's being elevated. It's always been there, but the conversation's being elevated. How do you two as leaders in your communities, in your countries, in your states, with others around you as leaders, how do you keep focused among all of this? How do you keep hopeful with all of this circling our heads? And how do you keep positive in this very complex and compelling world of conflict?
I have a very brilliant answer to that, but I'll let Rob start.
Oh, I was going to let you, because I will tell you, it's let me tell you, Rita, I'm preaching to the choir with you. It's hard. I'm just going to be very, very honest with all of our people. It is hard. It is hard to wake up every day when you see that wall getting higher, by the way. Okay. I would love to say that I wake up every day and I see the bricks being knocked off the wall. That's not what I'm seeing. And especially in the last several years, is I see that wall getting higher, but I keep reminding myself of why I do what I do. And that is because I truly, truly, truly believe that if I continue to do what I do today, that my children's future will be brighter tomorrow. And I realized not a lot has changed since the 70s when I came into the system, but I truly, truly believe, that if we continue to do this, as much as we might not see that brick get pushed away, we're pushing it. We truly are pushing it, but it's not easy.
I would say in terms of like strength to kind of keep going, there are a couple of things. One is there's something that happened with my stepfather years ago. My stepfather was the most wonderful man. Like both step-parents in my life have been heaven sent. And my stepfather, my mom and my stepdad used to come all the time to help me with the kids when we lived near each other. And one day my stepfather's like sweeping our back porch. And I said, John, like, you help me so much. Like, why? Why do you help me so much? And he paused and he said, it makes my life better. And it was such a beautiful and honest answer. And I think that that's true for me. Like minimally, when you can like try to make the world better around you, it makes your life better. You can believe that there's some meaning and some purpose. And so I feel like that's true. And that's what can kind of keep going when things get frustrating, is like, I don't want to do something different. And the other piece of it, I think, is that we just have to, all we can do is believe that it's going to have impact. And sometimes I don't, and sometimes I do. And another piece of it is that I find like weeks will go by and I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I've even thought about the kids in foster care. And, I don't think I've even thought about them in the past few weeks. Like, you're so into like moving forward what you need to do that sometimes like, and part of that is like, because if I thought about that all the time, I think I would be a mush. A friend of mine said, I sent her some information. She goes, "Oh my God, how do you do this every day?" I was like, I don't really think about it every day, because you kind of can't. And in terms of the political things that are going on, I, like many of us, am just completely furious. And you both haven't maybe seen the side of me yet, and I've seen like a very sweet, kind person, but I'm actually kind of a cynical bitch. And so like to be able to be like in the with people like that and to just sort of let loose, because it's absolutely infuriating. And you think about especially communities that say that they're communities of faith, and that they care about what God wants, I think, to me, what is holiness? To me, holiness is the opposite of waste. And so the question is, if you're thinking about this is what God wants, think, are we wasting children's lives? Are we wasting love? Are we wasting anything here? Because if the answer is yes, it's probably not holy.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. Quick question, and I know we want to move to whatever questions folks that are listening might have. Not everybody is in a position to step forward and foster. Not everyone is in a position to step forward and adopt, or maybe there are some on the call today that are now thinking about it. But what are some ways that people can jump in addition to fostering or adopting, to help these children, to help this cause?
I'm going to jump in and say real quick about the last question. Kids in foster care don't care whether you're red or blue. Okay, let's just make sure we understand that. They just care the fact that you care. And how can you do this? First of all, I remind people all the time, you don't have to do this, which is pull my wallet out, to make a difference in a child's life. Each and every one of us, whether we're white, black, gay, straight, male, female, we all have the same thing, the most valuable thing, and that's our time. Our time. Give your time. Find an organization like Susan's, like mine, like your Rita. Find an organization where you can volunteer, okay? Where you can truly impact a child's life. Pack a case. Go, I remind people all the time, if we would do one particular thing in foster care immediately today, I guarantee you we'll see change. And that is, we bring everybody within the community together around the table, and we realize, why are we there? And that's to make a better life for this child. So supporting the birth parents, supporting the foster parents, supporting the CASA worker, supporting the guardian ad litem, and supporting our community. That's something I think we need to do.
I, first of all, would not dismiss pulling the wallet out. So anyone who's listening, like, all of our organizations are nonprofits. So that is really important, because that's the only way that the work will get done. Rob's much more generous than I am. But also, in our communities, for example, there are people who have get licensed just so they can be emergency shelters, so that they can, they get to know the other people in the cohort and their kids, so that if something happens and the foster parents need to leave the state for some reason, the kids aren't just going to like a random family, they're going to someone that they know. And so I think it's really important to just be part of the community in that way, and the needs that come up are many. And so whatever, if you have a particular profession and a foster family, and that foster family could use like your expertise, offer that expertise, because either, they're waiting in line for a long time to get public services, or it's really expensive and they can't afford it. And so I think it's really important that if you have an expertise, to be able to find a foster family and get connected. And I think any of us here could connect you with the people who could connect you in your area with foster families. Offer that expertise. Do you tutor? Are you, are you a therapist of some kind? Are you, can you help with language development? Because that's often something kids will come and they need, and even for our kids who have been in temporary, like, to offer them speech support is really important, because then when we may not see it, but when they go to the next place and they can communicate better, that means a lot. So there are so many ways based on what you know and you do. If you're really good at organizing, go to someone's house and help them organize their house, like whatever it is, there are so many ways. And if you want to get connected, you can get connected.
It's brilliant. Thank you. And Suzanne, I will bring you back in and see what questions folks might have for these two
Thank you. First,
Amazing people.
I want to thank all three of you for such an important conversation. And the one thing I wanted to add to that, I've had the good fortune of being able to volunteer with Rob at his organization. And people shouldn't think that this conversation is only about what adults can do. The power of kids. I know Comfort Cases always talks about kids helping kids. I don't know, Rob, if you want to say anything about that. The idea that our whole community, kids included, are able to participate in helping other kids has a real benefit on the kids that are volunteering as well.
Yeah, I say this, empathy is something we're not born with. Empathy is something that is taught, and we should start at a young age. So with our organization, we have no age limits when it comes to kids coming in to volunteer. So we have kids as young as 2 years old packing cases. And when you bring children together and you truly educate them, they're going to help us change the future. They're going to do it. And I see, like today, I had 12 of these most amazing high school kids in our organization packing. I mean, you could just see the brightness in them. They want to see change. So yeah, I do believe kids helping kids is definitely a strength to our future.
Thank you. I want to go back to the religion question. In 2019, the federal government in South Carolina allowed a South Carolina agency to deny same-sex couples and non-Christian couples the ability to foster. In January, a Jewish couple in Tennessee filed a lawsuit because they were denied at first fostering because of a Christian organization. And just recently in April, an Arizona law was passed allowing organizations to be able to discriminate when it comes to adopting. And somebody else who's watching the call asked specifically, they have family members who feel like they are being discriminated against because they're Jewish in Hawaii. What can be done about this? Are there other organizations that are specifically helping in that area to lobby Congress? What can people do?
There are other organizations, and we can certainly send a list that you can post later. I know a number of them that we fund and that we're working with that have been advocates, strong advocates. And look, the distinction here is, for the first time, the rulings were that organizations that took public dollars were allowed to provide this discrimination. Private agencies, although they shouldn't, that was a different question, I think. But this was now agencies that receive public funds, federal, state funds, can in those states make those discriminatory decisions among themselves. So I think it is continuing to have a loud voice, knowing the options in your community, and using those options, and making sure that you'll find an organization that will respect and honor who you are as a family, as an individual. But things like the Human Rights Campaign and others are working very hard at making sure that this practice is not allowed to continue, and in fact maybe reverses, hopefully, in the near term.
I agree with Rita on that. And the fact is that, the one thing I love that she said is have a loud voice. Have a loud voice, because it happened to my husband and I when our four children arrived. The discrimination we got to adopt 4 Black children in the District of Columbia, and we were 2 white men. And then to fast forward, when my son at the age of 18, that we were to meet, he was with a Christian private agency in my state of Maryland. And when they found out we were a same-sex couple, refused to return our phone calls. And so what I did was I went to Baltimore City and I banged on the doors, because that's truly where he came into the system. Now, he was placed in a private agency, but his origin agency was the city of Baltimore, and I made sure they heard me. And by the way, 3 months later, my son came home where he needed to be. So have a loud voice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Susan, this question is a specific question for you, a personal question from someone who is in the process of adopting somebody. A child they've been fostering for 2 years. Once the adoption is final, they do plan to have the child converted to Judaism. This person would like to know, what are your thoughts before the adoption is finalized, starting the process of going to Hebrew school and being part of an organized Jewish upbringing?
Yeah, so I think part of the question is, how old is the child, and does the child come with some other kind of background, right? Because we can't just kind of like
Right.
swoop in.
5 years old in this specific case.
And has been with the family for 2 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think being part of their community is being part of their community. I would find out what the laws are, right? You have to be careful. I know for, you can't kind of impose a religion on a child that you have not yet adopted. And so you want to be careful, but to be part of their community and to celebrate things without being, what's the word, like dogmatic about it. I think they're just living in their community. I think that would be true for anybody in any kind of religious community, that you want the child to feel that they're grounded. And I know that a lot of people disagree with this, but I feel strongly that you can't give a child something you don't have. And so that the child, as part of your family, is part of that tradition moving forward. And it is really controversial. I've gotten a lot of pushback. At the same time, like, we have one of our families and they've got a teenage girl, and she came to them and she's Christian, and she's always practiced Christian. And so just within the cohort, now publicly, they sent a picture of like our first Christmas tree. Like, we've never had a Christmas tree before, but like, it's important to do that because that's what she knows. And that's what is going to give her comfort. And so you don't want to like pull the rug out from under a kid. But if this adoption is on track and they want to just kind of immerse her in their community, I would say immerse her in your community.
And Suzanne, I want to add to that because I read the question and they were specific to state that they have a child of color. And so as a father who has raised 4 children of color, do not make the mistake my husband and I made. And I'm telling you right now, we did make a mistake. And the fact is that, we tried to look past the fact that they were children of color. And if you did not look at my children of color, you did not see them. So immerse them within their community as well. That is so, so important. And by the way, my kids came at 6 months, 2, 2, and 4, and yes, but remind yourself to immerse them into their community. And I will tell you, one of the things that we made a mistake on, and I'm just going to put it out there, we wanted the best schools for our children. We didn't look past the fact that they were one of 4 Black kids, and growing up in that situation is hard. They need to see people that look like them. So that's just from one dad to another.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up because our time is coming to a close. I will, in 1 second, let everybody say one last thing. But I did want to let people know that we will be sending a follow-up email that will have a link to this recording. So please share it with others. And I will include the links to Rob's book, which is A Forever Family, and Susan's book, Casting Lots, the organization Comfort Cases, the organization Second Nurture, and the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, which, by the way, I've also put in the chat if anybody would like to access that immediately. So Rob, Susan, Rita, if there are any last thoughts you'd like to leave with everybody today.
I have something I'd like to share, which is that, Suzanne, like, you really kind of like modeled this collaboration and this connection that is so very important, and we met because you invited me to be on a podcast about something different, about an issue in Israel. And I happened to be in DC doing it. And you said, oh, you have to meet Rob Scheer. And you came and picked me up and brought me there. And magic was born. And so I just want to thank you for being someone who not only brings such important issues to light, but also who is just instrumental and intuitively just connecting people who then, can have some sort of really synergy and impact together. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Rob, Rita?
Yeah, I was going to say, Suzanne, I wanted to make sure, this would not happen without you. The fact that I met Susan, we got to do this amazing event, which, by the way, we're getting ready to do one in Columbus, Ohio. So I can't wait to see Rita and see everybody. But again, thank you for, talking about what we should try to talk about, at least in your language every week. Let's make baby steps. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'm just so grateful for each one of you that we had this opportunity to be together. If virtually, that's all right, but in person is better. So thank you to each of you for all that you do. How blessed am I to know you? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Susan, Rita, Rob, for joining us today. I want to remind everybody, you don't have to leave this conversation thinking you need to go out and foster, though that would be great, but there are other things that you can do. These organizations are ones that you can find out more information from. Again, please go to our website, momentmag.com, and sign up for next week's program. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.